I sold a piece of land years ago and now a new HOA claims that I owe them money. They are complete fraudsters and I honestly don't know what to do. Let's dive right into the video. So here's the deal. My grandparents owned about 25 acres of land in the outskirts of a small town in Iowa. They built their house there in the early 90s and that is where I've lived my entire life. After they passed, I inherited the whole shebang. Back in 2008, this developer swooped in and bought up a bunch of neighboring land. He approached me about selling some of mine and I said, sure, I'll part with 8 acres farthest from the house. He countered, asking for 15. I told him the extra 7 would cost him triple. He agreed, we signed the papers and that was that. Or so I thought. Well, the land sat empty for ages. It took forever for him to sell the plots and build houses. From 2008 to 2015, it was just vacant space. I did not mind, kept it mowed and tidy, but never tried to claim it as my own or anything. By last summer, he had finally finished the whole area and now there's about 150 homes in that neighborhood. Because of all this development, my remaining 10 acres are now worth about 15 times what they originally were. And you bet the HOA knows it. So since October 2018, I've been bombarded with angry letters and citations left on my property. Some highlights include having a shed larger than 8 by 8 feet, minus 25 by 35, having an eyesore vehicle on my property, it's a project truck I'm restoring, and the body is outside while I work on the frame in the shed. Having also a non-confirming mailbox, still clueless about this one, having the wrong type of roof shingles, again no idea. I ignored them and told the HOA busybodies that I'm not part of their little club, so their rules don't apply to me. They claim that since my property value has gone up, I owe back dues from when I sold my land, before a single house was even built, and I have to fix everything on their list of complaints. The back dues are supposedly $8,500, but they say if I don't pay by January 1st, 2019, I'll be charged interest on them. No clue where they are pulling this interest from, but I think their HOA fees are around $600 a year. It'll cost me about $12,000 to $15,000 to fix my house, and I think it's complete nonsense that they can even try to make me do this. Number one, I've gone through every document I signed, not a single one mentions an HOA or my involvement with it. Number two, I'm baffled why the HOA is even coming after me. I live almost 3/4 of a mile from the nearest house in their neighborhood. The whole development has its own fancy street signs and lamps. I don't have any of that, so how can they even claim that I'm part of the HOA? They are threatening to either make me pay up or put a lien on my property and take it over. From what I understand, if I pay the $8,500, doesn't that mean I'm admitting guilt and can be forced into the HOA? And here, ripe stars, this is another one of those stories in the long line of HOA scams. I really hope that OP does not bend over and instead fights this ridiculous HOA. If you were in this situation, what would you do? Let me know in the comments. Update to the story, I just had a long chat with a lawyer. He went through all my documents and asked if I was sure that was everything. I told him it was. When I sold the land, I put all the paperwork in one folder along with my taxes. He says there's no way I am in the HOA since I did not sign anything agreeing to it. He offered to send them a cease and desist letter and I brought up adverse possession, but he advised against it. He said it's better to get them to leave me alone rather than start a big fight. For now, he said not to pay anyone or sign anything. He will send out the C&D letter today, and he told me that if the HOA tries to contact me, I should just direct them to him. So I think I'm in the clear for now. Update number 1. I met with a real estate attorney recommended by a Redditor and did a title search. We are also trying to track down the old developer's master plans. Here is what we've uncovered so far. So basically, I sold my land to developer A, he owned it for about 3 years, then went bankrupt and lost the land to the bank. That is when the maintenance went to heck and I started mowing it myself because the bank did not care. The bank eventually sold it to developer B, who built the current neighborhood. We got in touch with developer B and he said he's no longer involved with the neighborhood and the HOA runs everything now. His company just owned the lots built on them and sold to families. They have zero say anymore. I asked if he thought he owned my remaining 10 acres and he said absolutely not. The entire neighborhood is on the old land plus the 15 acres I sold, so he was helpful and clearly had not done anything wrong. I asked my lawyer about filing for adverse possession now on the land I maintained, but he said it would be a waste of time and money. I was just considering it to annoy the HOA. The title search came up clean, showing my grandparents as previous owners and then me, so there's no way they could have owned my land. The records go way back with a clear chain of ownership that my lawyer says is incontestable. We sent the HOA a cease and desist letter telling them to stop contacting me unless they have signed documents proving I'm part of their HOA. They never responded, I was out of town, and came back to find my mailbox missing. Someone had cut it clean off the post with a chainsaw, wooden post with a metal mailbox on top. My lawyer says this is a big deal and that the postal service would throw the book at whoever did it. I bought an identical mailbox and set up cameras all over the property. If they try it again, I'll have it on tape. Here's the kicker though, we found out what they are really planning. So it turns out the HOA wants to build another community playground and a pool/clubhouse, and they need land for it. They cannot expand in any other direction because they are almost at the edge of a highway on one side and the other sides are zoned for agriculture. So basically, they decided to try and take over my land. They have not filed a lien on my property yet, so I'm guessing they were trying to force me into the HOA to make me sell my land below market value. Either way, they've shown their hand and now I am on high alert. We filed a police report about the stolen mailbox, so there's a paper trail. Now it is just a waiting game to see what they would do next. Should I send them a letter saying I know their plan and there's no way they can get my land? They got their monthly meeting every second Wednesday of the month, so it's coming up soon and I'm sure it'll be a hot topic. Should I show up? Update number 2. I was away for the holidays and came back on Monday to find my project truck I talked about before had been towed out of my driveway, my pond was emptied and filled with gravel and sand, and a 2-acre section of my property closest to the HOA, about 300 feet by 660 feet, was fenced off. I immediately called the police and filed a report about the stolen property. The truck was not registered and was just an empty shell, so I have no idea where it is or how to track it down. It's not worth much, maybe $2,000 or something, but it's the principle of the matter. That jerk of an HOA president has gone too far. I had my lawyer send the C&D almost 2 weeks ago and they haven't contacted me directly since then, except for this nonsense. I've hired a local salvage company to come tear down the fence this weekend. They are doing it for free since I'm letting them keep the fence materials to sell as scrap. My lawyer suggested I send a letter demanding payment to fix my pond. A local landscaping company quoted me almost $7,000 to restore the pond to its original state, so that is what he suggested I ask for, plus another $1,500 for loss of use of the pond. The HOA meanwhile has lawyered up, so I think it's best if I don't post anything else here until it is all settled. I didn't want to leave you all hanging though, since you've been such huge help. I've included a rough sketch of the property layout since a few people asked. And by the way, Ripe Star, since this is an older post, unfortunately, the sketch was not available on the image upload site anymore. Nothing on the internet is permanent, I guess. Anyway, it's not great, but it should give you an idea of the land. Update number 3. After 6 long months, everything's finally been resolved. This is my last post about this whole mess. I checked with my lawyer and he said it's okay to share. The HOA board got a lawyer to respond to my C&D and they requested a meeting ASAP with my lawyer present. I didn't want to go, but my lawyer said it might be worth hearing them out. At the meeting, I noticed the president and some of the higher-ups were not there. The board members who were present seemed completely clueless about what was going on, and their lawyer looked just as confused. After I laid out my timeline of events, they thanked me for my time and agreed to cover all the costs for restoring my pond, replacing my missing truck, and repairing the damages. I got checks for everything and had my pond restored back in May. I did not think much more about it until a few weeks ago when the new HOA president filled me in on what really happened. So it turns out the old president, treasurer, and another board member had been embezzling money from the HOA funds. They wanted my land to expand and build a pool, clubhouse, etc., just like I saw on their website. The old board hit everyone with huge fines to raise money to buy my land. Instead, they pocketed the cash. They thought they could just take over the land I was not using when their plan to buy it fell through. Long story short, their whole scheme fell apart after I fought back and brought it to the attention of the other HOA members. From what I've been told, the crooked HOA board members had to sell their houses to pay back the HOA and have since moved away. The new HOA has offered me market value for my land, and I'm considering selling since I don't really use it for anything and the money is pretty good. I didn't end up filing any complaints with the postal inspector since the situation resolved itself. I got a new project vehicle to replace the one that was stolen. For those asking, the old one was a 95 Bronco with a bad transmission. My new project is a 69 Charger that I'm planning to restore to its former glory. I want to give a huge thanks to all the Redditors who chimed in with advice, especially those from Iowa who knew the local laws. You all rock. And yeah, Ripe Stars, please let me know if you enjoyed the stories from r/legal advice, and I might post some more again in the future. The next one is a malicious compliance family story. And by the way, if you haven't already, I would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. For context, my brother is an inconsiderate douche canoe. It was a free day for me. I had a job with random scheduling, so it was either a weekday or a weekend. I'm chilling at home about to cook up something for dinner or late lunch when I get a phone call. 4:30 p.m. My brother called me and expected me to jump up and go pick him up from his job because none of the family were available on a busy weekend for them. When I say he expected, I mean he called me up and said the exact words, "You have to pick me up." This was before he had his own car and license, around 18, his job was on the other side of town, a full 30 to 40 minute drive or more depending on traffic, and it was at 4:30 p.m. just before hectic work traffic at 5 p.m. If I had refused to get him, he would have called either of our parents and whined until he complained to me to go pick him up. Understanding the box I'd been put in, a Grinch-like smile grew across my face as I made up my mind. What did I do? I picked him up and then made 3 stops along the way home, 3 long stops. The first was at a gas station. I'd been low on gas and he couldn't complain because I was his only ride. At the second stop, I pulled in at a restaurant to eat inside, Tijuana Flats. The whole time, he's complaining that I should take it to go and that we are only 15 minutes from home. The whole time he is whining about me wasting time and that he had to do homework. That homework took like 10 minutes and he just passed out with his TV and Xbox on. Eventually he even called grandma to complain, so much so that she called me to ask if I'd offered to buy him any food while there. I did, and then told him, tough, he wanted the ride, he got it. And finally at stop 3, a supermarket 4 miles from home, I needed a few groceries. Around 6:15 p.m. to 6:20 p.m. when we finally got home, he complained like a little witch to our parents, grandma and dad, but when my dad got home from work he just laughed, gave me a high five and was like, "Why didn't I ever think of that?" And I was like, "Hey, maybe next time. I'll come along so we can make a few extra stops." P.S. He had been doing the "you have to give me a ride" thing without a police inside for a while now, and it was starting to get on everyone's nerves. And the next one is a beautiful petty revenge fence drama story. A previous home I owned had previously been rented, and well, that tenant had thrown up a quick little chain link fence for his dog. Had the corners right at the corner of the house, just a quick fix that got the job done. Basically, I don't have a dog, so fence no fence did not matter to me. The day I moved in, my very young neighbor came over and asked, since she ran a daycare from her house, that was a whole other nightmare, that she would really like to put up a fence, and to save money, could they just tie into mine and save the cost of fencing an entire side of the fence. Now, I may be younger, but I'm not dumb. I knew that if they did that, they would be fencing in part of my property, and after a certain number of years with their maintenance of it, they would then own that property between our houses. Now, we are not talking a lot here, the houses were maybe 15 feet across, but if they did that, they would own everything up to the edge of my house. Even my air conditioner unit would be on their property. So then, I told her this and said no, she cannot now or ever tie into the fence. Also mentioned that interaction with my realtor, and she about threw a fit. Seems this person tried asking her the same thing, and she told her the same thing too. Now, if this was just a one-time thing trying her luck, it wouldn't be a big deal, but she kept asking off and on for a few years and I kept saying no. Even the husband came over to ask, maybe to intimidate a single woman. Still said no. I even did the research and got the actual property line map that showed exactly where our property lines were. One day, I saw a whole bunch of chain link fencing in their backyard, but not nearly enough to fence all the sides they needed to. They were gonna try and tie in anyway, despite me repeatedly telling them no. So that night I took down, rolled up the fence and dug up every single fence post. Now the neighbor had to come out and watch the kids she was supposed to be watching because my fence was not there anymore, so the kids had more avenues to escape. Plus it took them a bit longer to order more of the chain link fence and posts they suddenly needed. When I sold the house, I gave the new owner, a single man, a care package which included the official property line map and a note to watch those neighbors like a hawk. My realtor, yep, the same one, I loved her so much I used her again, knew the entire story and gave him the rundown as well. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. There are a couple of ways I can format this story, but for it to make the most sense, I think I will tell you what the neighbor did first without our knowledge and then get into the meat of things. Now, this neighbor is really big on the HOA and thinks that he has some sort of authority to do anything he wants. Several times we have had to kick him off of our property and even out of our pool. With him trying to claim it's public land because of the HOA, only for us to tell him that it is still our private property. And of course that he is not welcome. We have even threatened to call the police on him for trespassing if he didn't quit. His next solution was something that I find to be disgusting. So we share a fence and it does a pretty good job of keeping his wandering eyes away from us. He ended up drilling a hole in the fence just large enough that he could sit down on his side and look through. We have bushes over there, so we would have never seen it, but he was getting a great view of us and the backyard. My wife and I are the kind of people that don't like being cooped up inside, but also like our private time. Our backyard is perfect for that and we love our setup. We have some outdoor couches, a speaker to hook up music, a grill and a nice pool. And as some couples do, we sometimes enjoy swimming naked with each other. It's one of the biggest benefits to having a private pool in my opinion. Remember that at this point we had no idea about the spy a-hole and assumed that we were alone. So instead our neighbor was watching the entire time and from what I found out later was sitting there for a good while with us being totally naked. And yeah, there's a line between peeper and creep, and with the amount of time he was watching before doing anything else, I think that he crossed that line into creep. And by the way guys, I think if you drill a hole into a wall or fence to watch your neighbor, I'm pretty sure that makes you a creep by default. Anyway, at some point during his free show, he came to the conclusion that he was offended by it and actually called the police on us. You can imagine the embarrassment as our backyard filled up with police and we had to get out of the pool and get towels around ourselves. About 5 cops in total and my wife was mortified. She wanted to just go into the house and never come out again. I was more curious about what they were doing in my backyard since we didn't call them. Me? Can I help you, officers? We got a call about public indecency. Apparently you and your wife were exposing yourselves. Me? I mean yes, we were obviously nude, but I assumed it was fine in our own backyard. We have tall fences and wouldn't have ever gone into the front like this. I mean, you can see how embarrassed we are right now. That was when the neighbor started running over and yelling towards the cops. Neighbor, excuse me, I called to report these heathens for exposing themselves to me. It was disgusting, and as an HOA board member I can tell you right now that it is both illegal and against our bylaws. Officer, I'm sorry sir, hold on for one moment so we can make sure we got this right. So this couple exposed themselves to you and then got into their pool. Neighbor, yes. Officer, what were they doing on your property? Neighbor, they weren't, they were right here. Upon asking how he knew about it was when it was revealed to everybody about his magic little hole in the fence. He should have been glad that cops were around because I might have beaten him up for spying on us and seeing my wife naked. I couldn't stop myself from yelling and the police needing to have us be away from each other in order to get everything straight. I was busy having my own little fit wanting him arrested for spying on us, with the officer saying that they couldn't arrest him on the spot for that and I would have to file a separate report. For now, they had to finish with the indecent exposure issue. Neighbor was talking to another officer and coming up with his own reasoning of why it was considered that. For people that don't know, it's only illegal to be nude like that if you're in a public space or even around people that don't consent in a private space. Neither one of those rules were the case, so we were not exposing ourselves to anybody. It was not our fault that he was staring at us through a peephole without us knowing. I managed to catch some of the conversation going on between neighbor and an officer. Neighbor, but I saw them nude. That means they were exposing themselves to me. Officer, it's their private property. Unless you own this home and pool, they have every right to swim in it like that. You should not and cannot go looking at people through holes in a fence. Neighbor, this is an HOA neighborhood. That means there's no such thing as private property. It's all public and I had to watch them to see if they were following the bylaws. I have the right to do that. Officer, I don't know what rules it says in your bylaws, but I do know that our laws go above that and you are wrong in this case. If you want to file a lawsuit against them, I cannot stop you, but I can advise you that you will lose. In fact, if anybody has a case, it is them for invasion of privacy. The police eventually left and neighbor was forced back on his side of the fence. I know the police told us we could sue him, but unless he was gonna try first, we didn't want to bother getting a lawyer and all of that. He most likely would have ended up with a warning and getting free legal counsel from the HOA or something, while we would have to pay out of pocket. He did warn us that he wasn't done with this and was taking it all the way to the HOA president. Then supposedly we would get sent to court and fined for exposing ourselves. That threat has yet to come, and I have a feeling will never actually happen. He might not have a brain, but I'm sure at the very least the HOA lawyers do. What I did make sure was his hole was totally covered up. I added more bushes to really block him in case he tried to drill another hole into the fence. I also inspected regularly to see if he got any ideas. Again, so far he seems to be quiet and probably got told off by the HOA president. Still, I don't think I will ever figure out his logic on the whole situation. You can type in the comments if you think that what we did was wrong and if you side with him. The police siding with us was enough, and we will not stop enjoying ourselves on our private property because of one a-hole. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious what you have to say about this. Do you think that OP was in the wrong or not? And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.